Early astronomy goes back to 4000 BC with the Mesopotamians, who used ziggurats, which were essentially observatories with 7 levels. These observatories were used to study the celestial bodies above. Meanwhile, the Egyptians were using their astronomy for a more practical reason. They were using astronomy to build a calendar which would then tell them when the Nile would flood and when it was time to plant crops.
Now, while it is still in speculation, it is believed that Stonehenge, dates back to 2500 BC, was used as an astronomical calendar for predicting eclipse and solar events.
In 12,000 BC, the Chinese used their astronomy to record eclipses, meteor showers, guest stars, which were stars that had exploded, and comets as they came and went. In 1000 BC, the Mayans, or the Mesoamericans, built monuments that aligned with the sunrise, sunsets, equinoxes, and solstices. However, it was during 700 BC that the Babylonians understood the importance of observing the movements of the stars and planets on a daily, monthly, and yearly basis.
It wasn't until between 14,000 and 16,000 AD that the Arabs and Muslims were able to improve on the observation techniques in order to find more accurate data.
It wasn't until Pythagoras, who was born between 582 and 500 BC, that developed the first model of the universe that had a central fire in it.
Aristotle, who was born between 384 and 322 BC, modified the Exodus model and made it geocentric. It was not until between 1473 and 1543 AD that Copernicus proposed the idea of the heliocentric system.
It was not until between 1564 and 1642 AD that Galileo would help aid in the discovery of the heliocentric model. Thales was a merchant from Milos who was born between 624 and 547 BC, who traveled to Egypt in order to learn mathematics which would allow him to predict eclipses. Aristarchus was a mathematician who was born between 310 and 230 BC, who used geometry to find the size and distance of the moon and sun. Eratosthenes was a mathematician born between 276 and 195 BC, who also used geometry in order to find the size of the Earth using shadows. Ptolemy was also a mathematician born between 90 and 168 AD, who created a mathematical model of the universe depicting how far away the planets were from the sun. But it was Kepler, who was born between 1571 and 1630 AD, who would later create mathematical equations which would allow him to predict the rotations of the planets. Edmund Halley, who was born between 1656 and 1742, would later use similar equations to predict the orbit of comets. Bray was born between 1546 and 1601, who has also understood the importance of multiple observations. Hipparchus, who was born around 134 BC, discovered a new star and would later go on to create a catalog of brighter stars. Sir Isaac Newton, who was born between 643 and 727, later found the laws of motion and gravity. Einstein, who was born in 1879 and who would later die in 1955, wrote the general theory of relativity in order to account for gravity in space and time. Niels Bohr, who was born in between 1885 and 1962, made massive contributions to atom and quantum theory. Wolfgang Pauli, who was born in the 1900s and would later die in 1958, was known for his work on spin theory and quantum theory and the important discovery of the Pauli exclusion principle. Werner Heisenberg, born in 1901 and would later die in 1976, discovered a way to formulate quantum mechanics in terms of matrices. Edwin Hubble, born in 1889 and would later die in 1953, determined that there were other galaxies beyond the Milky Way. George Lumiere, born in 1894 and would later die in 1966, proposed the theory of the expansion of the universe. Robert Oppenheimer, who was born in 1904 and would later die in 1967, helped with the creation of the atom bomb. Fred Hoyle, born in 1950 and would later die in 2001, rejected the idea of the Big Bang Theory in favor of a steady-state universe and the mirror theory. Penzias and Wilson discovered cosmic background radiation in 1965. And finally, we have mankind's most notable achievement when Armstrong and Aldrin stepped foot on the moon in 1969.
The end.